bon petite baguettes, and welcome to another episode of Hello Mr. Burns, a research podcast where I talk about old school Simpsons episodes and how watching these episodes might make you sound smarter.
I am smart.
My name is Perrie, and I love The Simpsons so much that I hate
Every ape I see, from chimpanzee to chimpanzee.
Alright gang, I hope you brought your goggles because today's episode is a deep dive of Season 1, Episode 4, There's No Disgrace Like Home. So as always, we'll start with a super duper quick episode synopsis, list out new and notable characters, and then we're going to get straight into some good old research and did-you-knows. Again, this is one of those earlier episodes where the animation looks like it was done by me when I was in high school trying to draw The Simpsons from memory. And it should be noted that in this episode, the characters behave completely different to how they would in later episodes. It's a bit of a Twilight alternate universe episode in that way. This episode of The Simpsons is a certified low point of Season 1. In a DVD review of the first season, David B. Grout gave the episode a rating of 2 out of 10, placing it as one of the worst of the season. It was the first episode of The Simpsons to be aired in the UK and Australia, and that means that basically the Brits and the Aussies were introduced to The Simpsons with the lowest rated episode. How upsetting is that?
Who earns?
In this wonderful podcast episode, you're going to be learning a little bit about aversion therapy. You're going to learn about a 1930s movie featuring pinheads and how Jodie Foster almost got a president assassinated. This episode is a little light on the pop culture department, but that's fine. We will lie back, we'll think of England, literally, think of poor England and the colonies getting this as a first step, and we will power through. Let's do a quick episode synopsis.
Marshmallow.
We open this episode with Bart and Lisa shoving each other. Homer wrenches them apart and asks why they're fighting. Lisa says this.
We were fighting over which one of us loves you more.
Oh, Homer's very moved, and he tells them to go back to it. They resume shoving each other, saying this.
You love him more. No, you do. No, I don't. Yes, you do. No, I don't.
This will be the funniest joke this entire episode. Homer takes the fam to a company picnic where the entire family ends up embarrassing him. Marge gets white gal wasted. Bart almost beats Mr. Burns in the sack race. And Lisa kind of floats around in the background. Once they get home, Marge, Bart and Lisa all argue that they did absolutely nothing wrong. Depressed by the outing, Homer has a drink at Moe's where he sees a television commercial for Dr. Marvin Monroe's Family Therapy Center. Dr. Monroe guarantees family bliss or double your money back. So, Homer pawns their television to pay for the $250 therapy session. They get to the office and Dr. Marvin Monroe asks the Simpsons to draw a picture of the source of their problems. Bart, Lisa, Marge and Maggie all draw Homer. Homer draws an aeroplane in flight. They get into a few arguments and Homer gets angry with Bart and tries to attack him with a lamp. In frustration, Dr. Monroe resorts to aversion therapy by wiring the family to an electric generator so they can deliver electric shocks to one another to deter misbehavior. The Simpsons shock each other so many times, largely due to Maggie just thumping on the button at random, that the generator is damaged and the entire city suffers a brownout, which is sunshine on a rainy day to Mr. Burns. Dr. Monroe gives up, refunds double their money, and the Simpsons use that money to replace their television. The end. First appearances in this episode, we meet Dr. Marvin Monroe, Eddie and Lou, and Smithers, who's finally the right color yellow. It's also the first episode where we hear Bart say,
Don't have a cow, Dad.
As I said, the family does act wildly out of character in this episode. Homer's much more caring and actually suggests eating at the dinner table instead of watching TV. Lisa's super bratty, and Marge offers to pawn her wedding ring to pay for a new TV. The writers of this episode have since acknowledged it, and they've said that this episode was really just an experiment to see which family dynamics work best.
Oh, I'm not much of a drinker.
I picked the perfect time to start.
Aight, team, let's get to some learning. When Marge is getting white girl wasted, she has this weird drunken haze hallucination moment where she's singing a song. The song that she's singing is a Dean Martin classic called Hey Brother, Pour the Wine. It is a tune and a half. Just listen to a little clip of it.
Hey, brother, pour the wine. Drink the drink that I have made. Hey, brother, pour the wine.
This song was co-written by Rogbag Dazarian, who played the composer in Rear Window, and who also created Alvin and the Chipmunks. So when the family arrive at the company picnic, Mr. Burns is greeting every one of his guests using index cards. So this character quirk was actually inspired by the way that former President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, used to use index cards for speeches, notes, and jokes. When I was searching up about Reagan, I went down a bit of a weird rabbit hole, and now you will too. Born in 1911, Reagan's father nicknamed his son Dutch due to his fat little Dutchman appearance and Dutch boy haircut. That is a direct quote. This little nickname stuck with him throughout his youth. In his earlier career, Reagan was an actor who got a 7-year contract with Warner Brothers. He spent the first few years of his Hollywood career in the B film unit, where Reagan joked that the producers didn't want them good, they wanted them Thursday. And if that ain't the perfect description of working in media, then I don't know what is. His most famous appearance was in a 1942 movie called King's Row, where he played a double amputee. He spouted this now iconic line.
Where's the rest of me?
Reagan loved this line so much that it's the title of his autobiography. He also served in the war, he was on the board of the Screen Actors Guild, and briefly worked for the FBI snitching on pro-communists in Hollywood. Absolutely skipping over his long political career and the time he punched an anti-nuclear protester in the face, I wouldn't mind exploring the attempted assassination of Reagan because it's much weirder than you think. Born in 1955, Reagan's would-be assassin was a man named John Hinckley Jr., who became utterly obsessed with the movie Taxi Driver. He went and saw the movie at least 15 times the summer that it was released. He read and reread the book it was based on, and he bought the soundtrack to the film, listening to it hours on end. Picture the scene out of The Joker when he's dancing around in his apartment. It's that, but to the soundtrack of Taxi Driver.
Are you talking to me? There's no one else here.
Hinckley was obviously very mentally unwell. Hinckley also fashioned a make-believe girlfriend named Lynn Collins, and she was kind of based on the character of Betsy in Taxi Driver. Just as Robert De Niro's character, Travis Bickle, had written home to his parents about a rich and beautiful girlfriend, John used to write home about Lynn, and he created vacations and visits. He wrote to his mother telling her all about breakups. All of it was just a fabrication of his mind. Hinckley's mother, Joanne, came to feel such a warm connection with Lynn after several years of corresponding about her with John. Obviously, John never brought her home because she was make-believe. And in later interviews, feeling the loss as though it was a close personal friend, Joanne said that she was most devastated by this. This, above everything her son had done, this hurt her the most. The most important part of Hinckley's obsession with the film Taxi Driver was his intense obsession with an actress in the film, Jodie Foster. In the film Taxi Driver, a then 14-year-old Jodie played a trafficked child prostitute, and Hinckley was just obsessed in love with her. He used to have photos of her. He envisioned a life where they were supposed to be together. He even went in so far as to enroll in a Yale writing course so he could be close to her while she was studying. He used to do things like slide love notes under her door, and he did manage to speak to her twice on the phone, where he assured her that he wasn't a dangerous person. As someone who's had a stalker, I can tell you that being stalked is even more terrifying than it sounds. Jodie eventually dropped out of college due to the stress from Hinckley's presence and the subsequent media circus. As Hinckley's mental health deteriorated, he became even more and more deranged. He bought a .38 caliber pistol and took selfies holding it to his temple. He even played Russian roulette twice, in November and December of 1979. I'm just gonna say, I'm not a doctor, but someone who willingly plays Russian roulette and is not Russian is probably someone who needs to get some help. In 1981, Hinckley wrote a letter to Jodie Foster describing his plan to assassinate President Reagan to impress her with his historical deed, air quotes. He left his hotel room, took a cab to the Washington Hilton where Reagan was set to make a speech, and waited. At around 1:30, when Reagan had just gotten out of his limousine, Hinckley stepped forward from the crowd of television reporters and fired a total of 6 shots from a revolver. Hinckley wounded police officer and Secret Service agent Timothy McCartney and critically wounded press secretary James Brady. Although Hinckley did not manage to hit Reagan directly, the president was severely wounded when a bullet ricocheted off the side of the presidential limousine and hit him square in the chest. Wanting to avoid another Lee Harvey Oswald disaster, secret agents immediately tackled him. Poor James Brady took a bullet to the temple, and while he did live, he remained paralyzed on the left side of his body until his death in 2014. Brady's death was ruled a homicide 33 years after the shooting. Hinckley was found not guilty by means of insanity and was placed in a home where he was constantly in trouble for doing things like plastering the walls of his room with pictures of Jodie Foster, becoming pen pals with Ted Bundy, and trying his best to be friends with one Charlie Manson. Hinckley is actually now free, and he currently has a YouTube channel where he shares covers of Elvis, Bob Dylan, and has released his own song. It's called Majesty of Love. The cherry on top of this assassination story is that Jodie Foster is famously a lesbian. Despite this, Hinckley still sticks to his guns and says that this is a lie and that he and Jodie are meant to be. There's also a whole sub-conspiracy plot happening with this story because Jodie Foster's dad was best friends with Vice President George Bush. If Reagan had been assassinated, Bush would have been made president. Supposedly, Bush was also involved in the assassination of JFK. But if you want to go that route, I would say check out last podcast on the left and their series on the JFK's conspiracy theories. It's fantastic. Okay, for this one, I'm going to assume that we've all heard this chant.
This is where you belong. Yeah, Homer. Room for one more. One of us. One of us. One of us. One of us.
But did you know where this is actually from? I know I personally didn't know that this chant comes from a 1932 controversial cult hit film called Freaks. I did watch a few clips from this movie and holy moly, it's actually very, very sad. All right, guys, buckle up for this one. The film is directed by a former circus clown and contortionist, Todd Browning, and the film follows a trapeze artist who joins a group of carnival sideshow performers with a plan to seduce and murder a dwarf in the troupe and gain his inheritance. The chant is used in the movie during a climactic scene where the trapeze artist named Cleopatra is being welcomed by the freaks as being one of them, despite her being what they call a normal outsider.
We accept a one of us. We accept a one of us.
Cleopatra loses her mind at the chant and begins drunkenly berating everyone, saying that she will never be one of them. So in the film, Cleopatra develops a relationship with the circus strongman, whose name is Hercules, while attempting to seduce and murder Hans the dwarf to steal his inheritance. When the freaks find out her plan, they capture Cleopatra, and sometime later, she's shown to be a grotesque, squawking human duck on display for carnival patrons. Her tongue has been removed, one eye has been gouged out, and the flesh of her hands has been melted and deformed to look like duck feet. She's even had her legs cut off, and what's left of her body has been permanently tarred and feathered. In the original version of the film, it was revealed that after the freaks caught Hercules, they turned him into a eunuch by castrating him. They actually cast real-life circus performers in this film. And by performers, I mean ye old-timey circus freaks. Some notable characters include conjoined twins Daisy and Violet Hilton, a few characters suffering from microcephaly, don't know if I've pronounced that correctly, but that means that they have smaller heads than average. In this film, these characters are helpfully referred to as pinheads. There was a character who was a bearded lady, although in my family that's just normal Greek genes, who was reportedly the biggest prima donna of the cast and an absolute nightmare to work with. Again, in my family, that's just being your true authentic self. There was also a man named Simon Metz, whose freakiness was that he wore a dress. Here are a few key did you knows from this movie. There's an absolute infinite list of notes on this film, so I decided to distill it down and just give you the good stuff. During the shoot, MGM segregated the film's cast and crew to a separate cafeteria, and I quote, "It was done so that people could eat in the commissary without throwing up." In fact, F. Scott Fitzgerald, who is author of The Great Gatsby and Benjamin Button, was a member of the MGM writing department at the same time that this movie was in production. He recounts that one day, as he came into the studio commissary for lunch, he saw the Hilton sisters. One was reading the menu, and the other seemingly understanding it. He was horrified, became nauseous, and left the lunchroom. The on-screen romance between German dwarves Hans and Frieda was very subdued because the roles were being played by real-life brother and sister, Harry and Daisy Earls. Prince Randian, the man with no arms or legs, developed a habit of lurking in dark corners during production and scaring passerbyers by screaming at them out of the darkness. There's also a fantastic scene from the movie, you can find it on YouTube, where he rolls and lights a cigarette using only his mouth.
Oh, that's the kind of family unity I like to see.
Okay, so in my previous episode, I said I would explore aversion therapy, but once I found the Reagan assassination of freaks, I thought that was so much more interesting. Kinda shot myself in the foot there, but I'll stick by my word and I'll try and wrap this aversion therapy bit up in under a minute. Aversion therapy is a type of behavioral therapy that involves repeat pairing of an unwanted behavior with discomfort. I remember there was a kid in school who would keep a rubber band around his wrist, and whenever he missed a goal in football, he'd snap it to try and do something. I'm not sure, he had a plan. So the stuff about aversion therapy is a little bit dry and boring. But I did find this in a list of aversion therapy throughout history. In about 50 AD, Pliny the Elder attempted to heal alcoholism. This was in the 1st century of Rome. So what he used to do is he used to put spiders into the drinking glasses of alcoholics. Pliny the Elder, I also found out, died during the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, but not from the volcano, and he wasn't in Pompeii. Pliny got a message from his friend, Rectina. I know her name is Rectina, but all I want to say is Rectina, who she had written to him because she was left stranded during the eruption. He ran to the docks and he boarded one of the several galleys setting sail. When they got closer to the volcano, all this pumice and cinders began to fall from the sky. Absolutely shook to his core, the helmsman said they had to turn back, to which Pliny famously replied, "Fortune favors the bold. Steer to where Pomponianus is." Oh my gosh, okay, so that last name I've really struggled to say, and I've actually written it out phonetically. Pomponianus. It's spelt Pomponianus. They reached land and they found Senator Pomponianus, but the wind was blowing the wrong way, so they couldn't leave on the boat again. Apparently Rectina was already dead. Rector didn't even know her. A massive plume of toxic gas engulfed them, and the crew and Pliny began running. Pliny, who reportedly suffered from a chronic respiratory condition, possibly asthma, died from asphyxiation caused by the gas. Although some say that he got a heart attack trying to run away from the gas because he was a certified chunky boy.
Oh, don't make me run! I'm full of chocolate! Oh.
And on that juicy, thick, spicy cloud note, we reach the end of another episode. Whew, I hope you guys enjoyed that one and feel a little smarter, or at least a little less stupid. The next episode is entitled Bart the General, and you can look forward to discussions about Nazis, war, and where that iconic line from Dodgeball comes from. I'm Perrie. Thanks so much for listening. And as always, keep watching the skis.